Hello, hello. Welcome again, brothers. Welcome back to the Savage Gentleman. This week, we're going to continue our profound journey into the heart of biblical masculinity through the lens of embracing responsibility. I'm your host, Pastor Benjamin Wilson, and in this second part of our discussion, we're going to dive into the lives of some remarkable biblical figures who exemplify what it truly means to live a life of responsibility, men who embraced responsibility. In our previous session, we laid the foundational understanding of responsibility, exploring its scriptural basis and the modern challenges that we face in this area today. Uh, in these days, we turn the page we turn to the pages of scripture. In this discussion, we're going to turn and look at the scripture to see these principles in vivid action. As men striving to embody the values that God esteems, we often look to the Bible not just for direction, but also for inspiration. The lives of three gentlemen, Boaz, Jehoshaphat, and Gideon, are beacons of such inspiration, each highlighting different facets of responsibility that resonate deeply with the challenges and calls to action we face today. Boaz shows us the importance of protector and provider. Jehoshaphat illustrates the impact of righteous leadership, and Gideon's transformation from hesitance to bold action teaches us about the courage required to fulfill our God-given roles. In this episode, this portion of the episode, we will not only recount these stories, but also draw out the practical lessons that can be applied in our daily lives. Whether you're leading a family, involved in your community, or seeking to make a difference in your professional sphere, these principles of responsibility that these men laid out and lived out are relevant as ever. By examining their lives, we aim to understand how to better navigate our responsibilities and how to effectively impact our world by living out our faith with integrity and purpose. Brothers, I invite you to join me as we look at these examples, these transformative examples, and seek to apply the lessons from their lives in our journey toward true biblical masculinity. Let's be inspired by their legacy to enhance our own roles and responsibilities in a world that desperately needs men of honor and men of commitment. Let's dive into this. The first gentleman we're going to look at is Boaz, a model of integrity and protector of the vulnerable. Boaz, a prominent figure in the book of Ruth, is often celebrated for his role as a kinsman redeemer. His story is one of integrity and proactive responsibility, particularly in his interactions with Ruth, a Moabite widow. Despite her foreign status and vulnerability, Boaz showed exceptional kindness and responsibility. He ensured Ruth could glean safely in his fields, providing her not only with physical protection, but also with abundant food. This act of kindness was rooted in his adherence to the Levitical laws that called for care of the widows and foreigners, showcasing his commitment to God's commands. However, Boaz's responsibility it extended further when he took it upon himself to ensure that Ruth's rights as a widow were preserved. He adhered to the cultural laws, excuse me, of marriage, of Levite marriage, which tags a close relative with marrying a widow to preserve her deceased husband's lineage. Boaz willingly accepted this responsibility, demonstrating a deep sense of responsibility to his family and to his community. His actions not only secured Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi, it secured their future, but also upheld the social justice principles outlined in the Torah. Boaz teaches us today the importance of integrity and proactive responsibility. He exemplifies how men can use our positions and resources to protect and uplift those who are vulnerable. His story encourages us to respect and apply the principles of justice and compassion within our communities, ensuring that our actions reflect a commitment to righteousness and to service. The next man we're going to look at is Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat, his leadership was anchored in faith and justice. Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah, noted in first. You can read about Jehoshaphat in First and Second Chronicles. But as it was noted there, he exemplified responsible leadership by prioritizing the spiritual and judicial reforms in his kingdom. Recognizing the people's need for guidance and fair judgment, Jehoshaphat established courts in the fortified cities of Judah and appointed judges with the charge to act with the fear of the Lord, faithfully and with a devoted heart. His reforms aim to bring the people back to worshiping the Lord, demonstrating his responsibility to lead not only in civil matters, but also in spiritual upliftment. His commitment to God's laws was evident when he sent Levites and priests throughout the entire kingdom to teach the laws of the Lord. This action was not merely administrative, but a profound demonstration of his responsibility to foster a spiritually aware and ethically minded citizenry. Jehoshaphat's story is a powerful reminder of the broader scope of responsibility that includes leading by example in faithfulness and justice. He shows that true leadership involves more than authority. It requires a commitment to God's principles and a genuine concern for the spiritual and moral welfare of the people one leads. This narrative, brothers, it encourages us to integrate faith in every aspect of our leadership roles and to seek wisdom and guidance from God in all of our endeavors. The last person I want to highlight right now, and there are so many men that we can look at their lives and see how they embraced and demonstrated responsibility, especially in light of or through the lens of or with the goal of recognizing true biblical masculinity. But the one I want to look at right now is a man by the name of Gideon, a reluctant leader who embraced divine responsibility. Gideon, featured in the book of Judges, offers a very unique example of responsibility in biblical narratives. Initially, Gideon was a hesitant leader. His story begins with him threshing wheat in a wine press to hide it from the Midianites who were oppressing Israel at that time. His initial fear and reluctance give way to a remarkable transformation into a responsible leader after an encounter with the angel of the Lord. This divine meeting marked the beginning of Gideon's journey towards embracing his calling to deliver Israel. Despite his doubts, and I want to, we'll spend some time in another episode when we look at different men of the Bible. We'll discuss the Gideon's story, where we'll see, despite his doubts, he responded to God's call with cautious obedience. Cautious obedience. That's something that I think as men we can overlook sometimes. Is we're either one of those individuals where we move into disobedience and just don't do it, or we go in without ever counting the cost, without ever weighing the options, or when we're called to obedience, we jump right in, which is good, but there's still this element of cautious obedience. And we'll look at that again when we look at Gideon a bit later. He started small by tearing down his father's altar to Baal and the Asherah pole beside it, replacing them with a proper altar to God. This act, though initially secretive, signified Gideon's willingness to step into the responsibility God laid before him, setting a foundation for his leadership. He later evolved into a courageous leader who, with just 300 men, defeated the Midianites with strategic and divinely inspired tactics, showcasing his full acceptance of his role. I encourage you, read the story of Gideon's battle, or the story of his strategic tactics that were divinely inspired, by looking at Judges 7. Gideon's transformation from a reluctant to a resolute leader teaches us today about the importance of embracing responsibility, even when it seems daunting or when we feel ill equipped. His story encourages us to trust in God's presence and guidance when stepping into new roles or facing challenging situations. Gideon's journey underscores that true responsibility involves faith, courage, and a willingness to act despite fear. Gideon also exemplifies the impact of responsible leadership on a community. His obedience and faith not only led to his personal growth, but also brought liberation and peace to the people of Israel, highlighting how one man's willingness to embrace his duties can lead to significant positive changes for the wider community. Each of these men, Boaz, Jehoshaphat, and Gideon, provide a unique perspective on the role of responsibility in biblical masculinity. Their stories not only demonstrate how we today can actively engage in our duties to God, family, and community, but also highlight the transformative impact such responsibility can have on a larger scale. Their stories encourage us to evaluate our own lives and to actively seek ways to embrace and fulfill our God given responsibilities. By doing so, we can significantly influence both our immediate circles and broader communities, embodying the true essence of biblical masculinity. Over the course of this episode, the content that we've discussed, as well as the previous one, in embracing responsibility, there have been elements of responsibility that we have highlighted, that we've touched on, and I just want to take a few more minutes to talk about each one of those. The first is taking full responsibility for actions and consequences. Living with integrity, these elements of responsibilities. The first one, taking full responsibility for actions and responsibility. Living with integrity and honor requires that one take full responsibility for their actions and the consequences that follow. This principle, deeply rooted in biblical teachings, is exemplified by figures like Boaz, who not only provided for Ruth and Naomi, but also ensured their legal and social protection. His actions demonstrate a commitment to doing what is right, not just in private, but publicly, showing that true responsibility involves owning one's decisions and their impacts. This level of accountability is crucial as it fosters trust and respect within the community and serves as a model of godly behavior that others can aspire to. Again, the first one was taking full responsibilities for actions and consequences. The second one I want to bring to our attention, brothers, is being a proactive leader in family and community. Proactive leadership, particularly within the family and community, is another critical aspect of biblical responsibility. Jehoshaphat's efforts to guide his kingdom according to God's laws illustrate the impact of leadership that is actively engaged in promoting the welfare of others. By appointing judges and instructing them to fear the Lord, he ensured that justice and righteousness were upheld, benefiting the entire community. This kind of leadership not only supports the immediate needs of the community, but also builds a lasting foundation for future generations. We're talking legacy here. Being a proactive leader in your family and the community is a part of your leaving a legacy. Number three, aiming for a positive impact in all of life's aspects. The story of Gideon reminds us that our responsibilities extend beyond our immediate circles to influence all areas of life. His transformation from hesitance to bold leadership shows that with God's help, we can make a significant positive impact even under challenging circumstances. Committing to live out your values or live out one's values consistently, regardless of the setting, is essential for a life of biblical masculinity. Committing to live out your values and to do so consistently is essential for a life of biblical masculinity. It involves making choices that align with God's will, thereby influencing every aspect of life, from personal relationships to broader community interactions, and doing so with integrity and with purpose. Brothers, as we reflect on these elements of responsibility, taking full responsibility for actions and consequences, being a proactive leader in family and community, and aiming for a positive impact in all of life's aspects, I challenge you. I challenge each of you, and I am joining you in this challenge to evaluate your current responsibilities. Look at your responsibilities, take them under the light of interrogation, evaluate them, identify just for this week, just identify one area where you could improve your leadership or involvement and take specific action over the course of this week to step up in that area, whether it's in your family, if it's in your workplace, or even in your community. Look for opportunities where you can have a positive impact and demonstrate true biblical responsibility. Again, by embracing this responsibility, you will find yourself living out what it means to live out biblical masculinity. As we finish today's episode, brothers, I encourage you to dive even more into the stories, the men that we've looked at. Explore the biblical dimensions of responsibility. We've witnessed the remarkable lives of Boaz, Jehoshaphat, and Gideon. Again, I encourage you to look at these men. Each of them exemplify what it means to take on God-given responsibilities with zeal, wisdom, and integrity. From Boaz's protective and providential actions to Jehoshaphat's righteous leadership and Gideon's courageous transformation, their stories not only inspire but also instruct us in the pursuit of biblical masculinity. Boaz taught us about the importance of being a provider and protector who acts with kindness and respects the laws of God and the laws of man. Jehoshaphat illustrated the profound impact of leading with justice and faithfulness, prioritizing the spiritual and judicial welfare of his people. And Gideon's life reminded us that embracing responsibility often requires overcoming personal doubts and fears to fulfill the roles that God ordains for us, even when they seem daunting. Through these examples, we learn that responsibility, in biblical terms, is multifaceted. It involves personal integrity, active participation in community life, spiritual leadership, and the courage to act according to God's will. Each story not only reflects the historical and scriptural truths, but also resonates with practical implications that we can implement into our daily lives. These stories encourage us to evaluate how we handle our responsibilities and challenge us to step up in areas where we may have been lacking. They also offer a blueprint for how to lead, serve, and influence effectively. Let these narratives stir you to action. Let it stir us all to action. Consider how you can apply the lessons learned from Boaz, Jehoshaphat, and Gideon in your life. Are there areas where you can be more proactive? Are there commitments you have overlooked? Are there commitments that you've overlooked? This is a call to each of us to not only embrace but to excel in our responsibilities, ensuring that every aspect of our conduct honors God and enriches the lives of those around us. Brothers, I want to thank you once again for joining me for another episode, for another journey through the Savage Gentleman. Again, we talked about biblical masculinity through the lens of embracing responsibility. As we continue to explore the depths of biblical masculinity, remember the charge to be leaders, protectors, and faithful servants in every area of your life. Until the next time, be savage in your dedication, gentle in your leadership, and extraordinary in your impact. God bless you all as you embrace the full scope of your responsibilities with courage and faith. Through the next time, brothers, be savage, be gentle, be extraordinary.